Biblical rest. Why being busy isn't the same as being fruitful. Have you ever had a day where you were just busy from the moment that you woke up until the moment that you went to bed? I think all of us have. But when the day was over, you couldn't even tell what you actually accomplished. You answered messages. You handled everybody else's emergencies. You ran errands. You worked. You helped people. You cleaned the house, right? You dusted, you planned, you posted on social media, you even talked on the phone. You moved all day, but somehow you still went to bed feeling like you were behind. Here's something that I had to learn. Movement isn't always progress, y'all. And being tired is not proof that you've been fruitful. Sometimes we wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. I've been so busy. I haven't stopped all day. I barely had time to eat. I've been running since this morning. But what if God never asked you to do half of what caused you to be exhausted? See, there's a difference between having a full schedule and living a fruitful life. And today I want to show you something Scripture teaches us about biblical rest. Biblical rest isn't laziness. Rest, in fact, isn't quitting. Rest isn't procrastination either. Sometimes rest is actually strategy. The story, Martha, she was busy doing good, right? Luke 10 tells us that Jesus enters a village and Martha welcomes him into her home. Her sister Mary sits at Jesus' feet listening to him teach. But Martha is doing something completely different. Luke 10:40 says, but Martha was distracted with much serving. Now, I don't want you to miss that word, distracted. What was distracting her? Not partying, not sinning, not rebellion, serving. That's what makes this story so powerful. Martha wasn't doing something bad. She was doing something good that had begun to pull her away from something more important. And that is where many of us get exhausted. We're not necessarily doing bad things, right? We're doing too many good things without asking which things are actually God things for this season. Martha finally becomes frustrated and essentially she says, Jesus, don't you care that Mary left me to do all of this by myself? And Jesus answered her and said, oh, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things, but one thing is needful. Jesus wasn't condemning Martha for serving. He was actually correcting the condition from which she was serving. She was serving, but she was serving frustrated. She was serving, but she was anxious, right? Serving, but comparing. She was serving, but distracted. Serving, but resentful. And eventually her busyness affected her relationship with the person she was supposedly serving. That's when busyness has stopped being fruitful. Here's point number one. Busy measures activity. Fruitfulness measures impact. There's a huge difference here. Now, busy asks, how much did I do? Fruitfulness asks, what did I produce? Jesus says in John 15:5, he that abideth in me and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. I want you to notice something. Jesus does not say, he who stays busy produces much fruit. He says, he that abideth. That means sometimes the most productive thing that you and I can do is remain connected to the source. I want you to think about your phone, right? You can have energy. You can open every app. You can have messages coming in, videos playing, GPS running, calls happening, music streaming. Your phone can be doing a whole lot. But eventually all of that activity drains the battery, right? And once the battery dies, and none of those functions matter anymore. Some of us are trying to live at 2% battery while bragging about how many apps we have open. I want you to close something Everything doesn't need access to you all at the same time. Every opportunity doesn't deserve a yes. Every emergency doesn't belong to you. Every invitation isn't an assignment. Every person cannot have unlimited access to your energy. Fruitfulness requires wisdom. What deserves me in this season? Now, here's a question I want you to put in the comments. What am I doing that is keeping me busy but no longer producing fruit? I don't want you to answer it quickly. I want you to think about it. Here's point number 2. Rest is not procrastination, and it is not quitting. We have to make the distinction between sometimes people call something rest that is actually avoidance. Rest says, I'm going to recover so that I can return. Procrastination says, I know what needs to be done, but I'm continually delaying doing it. Quitting says, I'm no longer willing to continue. Those are 3 different things. Rest has intention. Rest says, I've been pouring out, so I'm going to replenish. I've been working, so I'm going to recover. I've been carrying responsibility, so I'm going to create space to hear God again. Jesus himself practiced this. In fact, Mark 6:31 says, come ye yourselves apart into a desert place and rest a while. Jesus told his disciples to rest. Why do you think he did that? Because scripture says people were constantly coming and going and they didn't even have adequate time to eat. Does that sound familiar? They were doing ministry. They were helping people. They were serving people. They were doing meaningful work. And Jesus still said, come away, rest. Why? Because your purpose doesn't require you to destroy yourself to prove that you're committed to it. Sometimes you don't need another opportunity. You may need recovery. Sometimes you don't need another meeting. You need silence. Sometimes you don't need another strategy. You may just need some sleep. And sometimes you don't need another motivational video. In fact, you need to sit with God long enough for your soul to become quiet again. Rest isn't abandoning the assignment, guys. Sometimes rest is how God prepares you to continue carrying the assignment. Here's point number 3. Fruitful people know what not to carry. Now, this may be the most important part. Martha said, Lord, dost thou not care that my sister hath let me serve alone? Her busyness had now become resentment. And that's something worth paying attention to, y'all. When you're carrying too much, eventually everybody who's not carrying what you're carrying starts irritating you. You start thinking and saying crazy stuff. Why isn't anybody helping me? Why do I have to do everything? Why doesn't anybody understand? Why am I always the one that everybody calls? Sometimes the answer isn't that everybody around you needs to do more. Sometimes the answer is you need to carry less. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Everything has a season. That literally means something that was necessary last season may not belong in this season, and that's okay. You need to periodically ask, is this still my assignment? Is this relationship still mine to carry? Is this responsibility still necessary? Is this system still working effectively? Am I continuing this because God told me to, or because I've always done it? See, faithfulness requires pruning, right? Jesus says in John 15:2 that the Father prunes fruitful branches so that they can produce more fruit. I want you to think about that. Sometimes God isn't removing something because it was bad. He's removing it because you're entering a season where your energy must become more focused and intentional. And you and I can't give everything equal attention and still give the important things excellent attention. Let's take a personal moment. I want to make this really, really, really personal. There are seasons where you can become focused on being responsible. If you stop asking whether or not you're actually going to be effective. And sometimes slowing down feels uncomfortable because busyness makes us feel needed. When the phone isn't ringing, when nobody needs anything, when the calendar isn't full, when we're sitting quietly, we have to face ourselves. But your value isn't determined by how exhausted you are. You actually don't have to earn the right to rest by completely wearing yourself down first. Psalms 127:2 declares, "It is vain for you and I to rise up early, to sit up late, so he gives his beloved sleep." God never designed human beings to function endlessly without replenishment. There is a rhythm: work, rest, listen, move, pour, refill, and then do it all over again. The strategy: ask these 3 questions to yourself. Number 1, what's producing fruit? Number 2, what is the only thing that I'm exhausted by? Number 3, what needs to be paused, delegated, changed, or completely released? Because you don't need another busy schedule. See, Martha was moving, Mary was sitting, but Jesus said Mary had chosen what was needed in that moment. That doesn't mean that we sit forever. Eventually we get up. Yes, we work, we build, we serve, we create, and we lead. But we don't work to prove our worth. We work from a place of connection. So maybe you're not lazy, right? Maybe you're just tired. Maybe you're not quitting. Maybe you just need to recover. And maybe you're not really unproductive. Maybe God is teaching you to know how to stop measuring your life by how much you can carry. I want you to remember one thing. Busy is about how much you're doing. Fruitful is about what you're doing to produce. And sometimes the most fruitful decision that you and I can make is to stop, sit at the feet of Jesus and listen. So allow God to show you what actually deserves your energy. If this spoke to you, I want you to comment, "I choose fruit over plenty." Send this to somebody who has been carrying too much. Maybe they don't need another job. Maybe they just need permission to regain their rhythm. God bless.